As most of you know, I came from the bass boat side of tournament bass fishing. In my transition to bass fishing from a kayak, one of the hardest things that I've found is selecting which ramp to start at. In this video, I'm going to help you narrow down your ramp choices and put together a tournament strategy. It doesn't matter if you fish out of a kayak or a $100,000 bass boat. If you want to increase your chances of success, make sure you watch the video to the end because I'm going to put some random tips throughout the video. Let's dive in. Some of the lakes where I fish have 60 public boat ramps, which makes your choice very complex and intimidating. In Queen City kayak bass fishing, we have a list of approved ramps that we take off from. Usually they're all listed and they're public. Let's take Lake Hartwell in South Carolina, for example. To get from one boat ramp to another can take over an hour, so you have to plan accordingly. Selecting a launch ramp can be very nerve-wracking, especially if you've never been on the body of water before. Even if it's your home lake, there's several reasons you may choose to do a different ramp sometimes. Some of the reasons may be boat pressure, seasonal patterns, water clarity, or wind. No one has time to check out every single brush pile or boat dock when you're trying to get ready for a tournament. This is why I'm going to help you break down a body of water and help you select a ramp. I'm going to show you how I do it. There are obviously a lot of different variables for each time of the year, depending on where you go. So I'm going to just focus on this time of the year, the spawn. You can change the factors for whatever seasonal pattern that you're fishing in. The very first thing I'm going to do is research the body of water that I'm fishing. I want to find out what type of bass inhabit the lake, what their primary food sources are, historical tournament data, and the next thing I want to find out is the water temps in different sections of the lake. This can help me determine what stage the majority of the fish are actually in. After going through my initial list of things, the next thing I want to do is eliminate water. I usually do this by using a map, Google Earth, and Navionics. I can eliminate 70 to 80% of the water this time of year because it's the spawn. You're not going to need to go offshore that much, so the main lake is basically an afterthought for me. I'm definitely not going to say you can't catch them out in deep water, because you can. This time of year, you can catch them almost anywhere. Bass spawn in waves, so not all of them are going to be up shallow. Just remember, since they do spawn in waves, especially at different sections of the lake, include the main lake points and secondary points when you're searching. If you're a sight fisherman and bedding fish is one of your strong suits, then you definitely want to start down at the lower end of the lake where you have more visibility and clear water so you can actually see the fish and the beds. Here comes the first random tip. When bed fishing, keep the sun on your face, right? So that way you're not going to cast a shadow on the bed or on the fish. This is going to require you to have a good pair of polarized sunglasses. I'm going to eliminate deep creeks and just fish flats and run out areas that are protected from the north wind. I also want to make sure that the areas that I'm fishing are getting good early morning sunlight. This is very important. The next thing you want to remember, spotted bass will sometimes spawn a lot deeper than largemouths. So you make sure you remember that when you're scouting. During the spawn, we are usually taught through textbook, video, or through other fishermen to start at the upper end of the lake. I will say this is usually the gospel on most lakes because of the sun exposure. On my home lake of Lake Norman, this may not be the case because of the warm water discharge we get from the power plant. I'm not going to tell you where to fish, but I will tell you what to look for. You want to look for south-facing shores that are usually because they're more protected from the wind and the current. I know I spent a lot of time on the spawn, but I think the seasonal patterns that the bass are in are one of the best indicators to help me start and select which ramp I'm going to fish at. If it was June and most of the fish have already spawned, I would devote just as much research to the post-spawn or summer patterns. Here comes your second tip. During the spawn, if you get a bite, It may be a very subtle bite, and you're saying the fish aren't committing, but you could possibly be fishing on a bed. If you are, throw it back out there, give it a few minutes, and remember, the bass are not always biting or hitting the lure. They're just taking it out of the bed and removing it from the bed. So it's going to be a subtle bite. Let's look at another situation that can help you make decisions of where to start. The moon phase is something I look at because bait fish tend to be more active during full moons, and bass usually follow suit. Since the bass have been, heavily feeding at night because of the full moon, they're sometimes less likely to continue feeding late in the morning, and you might find yourself waiting for an afternoon bite. This is not always the case because I've been out there and sometimes they feed constantly after a full moon. But if you do find yourself in that situation where they're basically shut down that morning after a full moon, don't panic. You want to throw something like crankbait, something that's going to basically trigger a reaction strike, or you can go finesse. Eventually, the fish are going to turn on and start biting. Just make sure you're in the right area when it happens. Weather plays a huge role in where and how I start fishing, so it's something I pay close attention to before the tournament. We've always heard the term wind is your friend. It can definitely make fishing better, but sometimes it can make it extremely hard, especially if you're fishing out of a kayak. I will say this again. Know the primary food source for the fish you're basically targeting, whether it's shad, blueback herring, brim, crawfish, or something else. This is where electronics come in very handy. Sometimes you can actually see the bait fish, especially if something's, after them or chasing them. You don't always have to have electronics. You might have to ask someone. I would suggest asking one of the best fishermen on the lake. And to me, those are birds. Blue herring, loons, and seagulls. When you see these birds, they're not usually there just for the scenery. They're there because of bait fish or something else. A lot of times the bass, are trying to help us out, but we don't listen. When you catch a bass and it spits out a shad, you want to pay close attention to the size of that shad and try to match the size and color. This is what they call matching the hatch. The same thing if they spit up a crawfish. If a bass spits up a crawfish, one of the first things I'm going to look at is the color of the crawfish. And also, I'm going to look and see if there's any rock around, and I'm going to basically target that rock. If you don't have the time to pre-fish, you can drive to the lake and check out potential ramps. This way you can actually see, the water clarity, see if there's any signs of life around the dock, like bait fish, bluegills, or birds. You can also get a first-hand look at the area that you're going to be in, because usually when you're out there and launch, it is dark. So this could be very, very valuable. Use Google Earth or Navionics in your ramp selection process. I try to find ramps where I can fish my strengths. I try to find areas around the ramp that are feature rich in different types of structure. I like fishing docks, laydowns, channel swings, humps, points, drop offs. So I try to find an area that is abundant with that type of structure. I know most of us have full-time jobs and we can't pre-fish like we want to, but you can still research the lake and narrow a lot of things down without pre-fishing. I know all this info I put out is a lot, but if you plan on taking your fishing game to the next level, then you need to develop some type of game plan. You don't have to do everything I mentioned in the video, but I would try to incorporate a few things on each trip. Take all the information that you have, analyze it, and this should help you narrow down your ramp selection. Sometimes you might incorporate more than one ramp in your tournament strategy. For example, a ramp that's close to a lot of riprap or laydowns. And you can usually catch a few bass there on the morning on topwater or spinner baits, something like that. You could start there. When the topwater bite dies down, head to the next ramp. Last random tip. If you don't get a chance to pre-fish a body of water that you've never fished and you're in a kayak, I would do as much research as possible on the lake. And if you're still clueless, I would select the boat ramp that has the most bass boat tournaments out of it. A lot of fish are released there. They don't immediately swim back 20 miles where they were caught. They usually find the first place they can feed some form of structure. If you would like to answer, some questions related to bass fishing, shoot me an email at realtalk@gmail.com. Once again, realtalk@gmail.com, and I'll try to answer it online in my next video. If you got even a little value out of this video, you know what to do. Set that hook on the subscribe button, drop me a comment so I know that I'm giving you the content you like. Tight lines, everyone. Check out my next video and see you on the water. Out.